Greetings mortal. Well, bravo. The video game industry has once again delivered a moment of quiet, understated brilliance with the launch of Relooted, the latest offering from South African studio Nyamakop. In a medium renowned for its subtlety and restraint, here comes a title that dares, oh, how it dares, to combine light platforming, gentle puzzle solving, and the utterly uncontroversial topic of repatriating African cultural artifacts plundered during the colonial era. One can only imagine the hushed boardroom meetings where someone bravely whispered, yes, but will it upset absolutely everyone? And upset everyone it has, in the most delightfully British way possible, with a great deal of tutting, some strongly worded YouTube videos, and a peak concurrent player count on Steam that wouldn't fill the average village cricket pavilion. For the three of you who have somehow avoided the discourse, Relooted is a 2.5D heist platformer in which a charming crew of Pan-African vigilantes politely liberate real-world artifacts from the dusty vaults of Western museums. There are 70 such treasures to retrieve, each accompanied by tasteful educational notes explaining why, historically speaking, they might perhaps belong somewhere other than a display case next to a gift shop selling overpriced tea towels. You recruit crew members with colorful personalities, solve modest puzzles to plan your route, and then execute the escape with all the grace of a gazelle performing parkour across the rooftops of Paris, London, or whichever former imperial capital is feeling particularly possessive this week. It is, in short, the sort of game your aunt who reads The Guardian would describe as terribly important, while your uncle who comments under the Telegraph articles would call an outrage against civilization itself. The launch, which occurred a mere 24 hours ago across Steam, Epic Games Store, Xbox Series consoles, and, in a move of exquisite generosity, Day One on Xbox Game Pass, has been nothing short of a masterclass in modern audience engagement. Steam recorded a peak of 57 concurrent players. 57. That is not a typo, it is a lifestyle choice. One imagines the servers sighing with relief at the light workload, perhaps even finding time for a quiet cup of tea between connections. Reviews, where they exist, are mostly positive, a respectable 78%, if one believes Steam's curiously optimistic metrics, praising the game's elegant mechanics, charming art style, and its brave decision to treat history as something other than a loot box full of uncomplicated heroism. Yet quantity, as we all know, has a quality all of its own, and quantity has been rather thin on the ground. Naturally, this modest reception has been greeted with the calm, proportionate response for which the gaming community is justly famous. Certain corners of the internet, corners that shall remain nameless, though they rhyme with ⴶ rage merchants, have declared Relooted nothing less than the final nail in Western civilization's coffin. Comment sections brim with thoughtful contributions, concerns that the game glorifies theft, fears that it will inspire actual heists, a worry one suspects the British Museum security team finds rather flattering, and the perennial favorite, accusations that it is divisive, as though politely suggesting that Benin bronzes might belong in Benin is the true act of division, rather than, say, removing them by force in the first place. On the other side of the trench, defenders have hailed Relooted as a groundbreaking work of African futurist art, a vital educational tool wrapped in accessible gameplay, and proof that independent studios can still tackle big ideas without a 9-figure marketing budget. One suspects the game's greatest sin, in the eyes of its most vociferous critics, is not that it is poorly made, for it is not, but that it asks players to consider a perspective that has not traditionally been centered in blockbuster titles starring grizzled white gentlemen with very large guns. The developers at Nyamakop, a small Pan-African team spread across several countries, have responded to the furor with the dignified silence one might expect from people who have better things to do than argue with anonymous commentators who believe decolonization is a synonym for coming from my PlayStation. Their previous title, Semblance, was a gentle platformer about squishing blocks. One detects a certain progression in thematic ambition. To go from soft, deformable platforms to the harder edges of post-colonial restitution is, if nothing else, a bold career move. And yet, amidst the sound and fury, a quieter tragedy unfolds. Here is a game made with evident care, featuring real artifacts, real history, and real voice acting from across the continent, launched on a major subscription service where millions could theoretically try it for no additional cost, and still the player count languishes in double digits. Is this the fault of the woke theme repelling the traditional gaming demographic? Possibly. Is it the inevitable fate of most indie titles in an attention economy dominated by live service behemoths and annual sports iterations? Rather more likely. Or is it simply that a thoughtful 2.5D platformer about cultural repatriation was never going to set the charts alight, no matter how elegantly executed? Perish the thought that reality might be duller than ideology. One cannot help but admire the sheer Britishness of the whole affair. The game itself is polite almost to a fault, no blood, no profanity, no microtransactions, just gentle puzzles and a spot of light larceny in the name of historical justice. The outrage is similarly restrained in its own way, no death threats, that we know of, merely endless videos with thumbnails of exploding heads and captions in urgent red text. Even the player numbers feel somehow understated, as though everyone involved agreed to be disappointed in the most civilized manner possible. What lessons might we draw from this exquisitely awkward moment? That controversial themes are commercial poison? Hardly. Controversy sells, provided it is the right sort of controversy involving scantily clad sorceresses or excessive violence. That education and entertainment remain uneasy bedfellows? Perhaps. Or simply that the gaming public, when presented with something genuinely new, often responds with the enthusiasm of a teenager asked to tidy their room. Nyamakop, one suspects, will survive this. Small studios often do, by virtue of having modest expectations and even more modest budgets. The artifacts featured in the game will remain, for the most part, exactly where they are, in museums that continue to debate their return with all the urgency of continental drift. And the discourse will move on to the next target, another trailer, another perceived slight, another opportunity to declare the death of gaming as we know it. In the meantime, Relooted sits quietly on digital storefronts, available to anyone curious enough to spend a few hours considering a different point of view. 57 people tried it on launch day. Perhaps tomorrow there will be 58. After all, in an industry that routinely spends hundreds of millions to deliver the same experience with slightly better graphics, a small game that dares to be different, and pays the price for it, feels almost refreshingly honest. This is your humble servant the Nerd Reaper, and I put the grim gaming takes in the bag.